Well, the Victorian government is planning to introduce new laws to crack down on anti-Semitism following the recent firebombing of the Israel synagogue in Melbourne. Now, according to the Sunday Herald Sun, the reforms being discussed include new police powers to break up protests involving religious hatred and extremism, as well as bans on face coverings and signs promoting religious hatred at those protests. They're also expected to ban protests outside places of worship. Now, I have a couple of problems with this, Kel, because the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia is not a failure of the law, it is a failure of social cohesion.
Yes.
Social division has been sowed in this country by governments. We now see the obvious result of that, and they then run around saying, well, we must now come up with a new law to solve that problem. It's not the law that was the problem. It wasn't a deficiency in the law that caused this. It was you not doing anything to actually lead. And now we're told we need more restrictions on our freedoms in order to stop what they allowed to happen in the first place.
Yeah, look, what should happen here is there was a brilliant piece by Janet Albrechtsen in the Weekend Australian. And she said if they'd acted earlier, not Victoria, but the federal government, the Albanese government, what he should have done was on the 10th of October 2023, the day after those disgraceful demonstrations at the Sydney Opera House, had an emergency recall of Parliament, passed a motion condemning anti-Semitism, had an impact on our culture. And she's saying what he needed to do at that point was simply to rewrite slightly the incitement to violence laws. The incitement to violence laws could be expanded to cover anti-Semitism, so that you take out the idea you've got to specifically incite one person to do something. If you're just inciting generally, which is what that would cover anti-Semitism, and there's a very silly defence of good faith, you'd take that out too. She said if we'd done that, then 14 months ago, the cultural development you're talking about would not have happened. The whole point is the Albanese government did not act. They did nothing. They sat on their hands except to go to the United Nations and vote against Israel and in favour of giving as much as possible to a non-existent Palestinian state. And every time they did that, it changes the atmosphere and the culture that you're talking about here. And all the pro-Palestinians see that that's how we're voting in the United Nations, and they're back on the streets again saying, we hate Jews. So not only have they done nothing that would have fixed the cultural problem you're talking about, they've inflamed it.
Yes, exactly. And then they rush in at the last minute, oh, we need some laws to fix this, Joe.
Yeah.
It is a lack of leadership that has led to this. And I find it quite rich to see people like Jacinta Allen now saying, oh, the scourge of anti-Semitism on our streets is awful. Well, where have you been for the last 14-odd months?
Yeah, I wrote a piece about this. There is something, what people fail to understand and what they fail to realise they are doing when they immediately add, Islamophobia or racism or all forms of prejudice to any condemnation of anti-Semitism is that these are two completely different things. Anti-Semitism is its very own, very specific development of a whole kind of range of deadly conspiracy theories over centuries, including all sorts of ridiculous stuff like blood libel and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, all this crazy nutbag conspiracy theory stuff that very specifically says, and therefore we must kill Jews, and therefore we must expel Jews from our communities or from our countries, right? So it's not just, it is worse than segregation, as terrible as that has been. In many ways, it's worse than apartheid. It is actually saying that these people are running a secretive, sinister, evil, deadly cabal where they're killing your children, where they're secretly running the world, but they're also not really human. They're a lot more like animals and they need to be exterminated as such, right? And this is a thread that has gone from basically the first time when the Jews were expelled from their homeland by the Romans in AD 70, right through to Christians doing it for centuries and centuries, Muslims doing it, although not as bad as the Christians, sadly. The Muslims did it, were protectors of the Jews for 800 years.
But you know that Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world.
That's immaterial. It does not in the same way.
Just FYI,
not in the same way.
just because you're throwing Christians into it, and I'm a Christian.
I'm a Christian too, but what Christians did to Jews was absolutely unforgivable. And then the Nazis came along and put both in the shade, and we all know what happened then. It was 6 million people dead in stateless states. They weren't killed in Germany, the vast majority. They were killed in Eastern Europe where there was no state, where they had absolutely no protections whatsoever. And this is in incredibly specific. It's not just being mean to someone because you disagree with their religion. It's not just having, xenophobia.
But I'm just, it's not that I disagree with you, Joe. I just kind of, you've put anti-Semitism, you've categorised it in a way where you only have those feelings if you only think that Jews fall into this particular category, that's how everyone feels. Like, I would venture to say that there are a lot of people who are only coming in late to the party post-October 7 developing an opinion about Jews. Like, I don't think that every person that feels this way,
whether they know it or not, is the culmination of centuries of historical and cultural conspiracy theories about Jews.
But not in Australia,
Yes,
because
in Australia, and throughout the West. And that is why, as soon as October 7 happened, there was suddenly this explosion of anti-Semitism that took everyone by surprise, as if it had just appeared from nowhere.
Didn't actually take the Jewish community out.
No, that's right. They're the only ones who've been on the receiving end of it for all this time. They have people who, they will have grandparents who told them what it was like in Nazi Germany and how they had to either flee or be exterminated.
The Australian culture discouraged that until 14 months ago, and the government failed to do anything.